The next session, A Conversation with Gina Raimondo, is sponsored by Business Leaders for Michigan. Please welcome U.S. Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, and Chairman of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation Executive Committee, Awenate Cobbina.
Good morning. It's good to see that most of you made it back from the Pink Pony alive. So we're here with the Secretary of Commerce, and we're going to have some interesting conversation today. But before we start, I want to make sure that everyone knows exactly what the Department of Commerce is and its breadth, because I don't think that everyone knows the ways that it touches you each and every day. And a little personal history. I know you're not here to hear about mine, but my first job out of college was working at a law firm in international trade as a paralegal. And I used to go to the bowels of the Department of Commerce every day to do research on international trade, because you house the International Trade Administration. So can you let our audience know about the breadth of the Department of Commerce and everything that you have responsibility for?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Big thank you to my good friend, Governor Whitmer, who's doing a fantastic job here. Thank you for hosting and inviting me. It's my first time to Mackinac Island. Definitely won't be my last. It's gorgeous. I love it. You know, the interesting thing about the Commerce Department is a better question is, what don't we do? The Commerce Department we run the Weather Service. In fact, when I first got this job, I texted a friend of mine, I had to go to a wedding back home, and I said, hey, what's the weather going to be this weekend for the wedding? And she texted back, don't you run the Weather Service? So, fair point. We run the Weather Service, we run the Census Bureau, we run the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, we run the International Trade Agency, we run something called BIS, which is, if you've heard about, for example, the U.S. not selling semiconductors to China or not selling semiconductors to Russia, that's us at the Commerce Department. We deny our adversaries advanced technology. And we run something called NIST, which is where all of our AI work is done out of. It's a standards and technology group inside of the federal government. So it's a huge, sprawling, 50,000 people, maybe 7,000 people stationed all around the world helping to promote trade. So when I took the job, I said, okay, what we need to do to tie this all together is have a single mission. You guys run businesses, you know. You can't get the team focused unless everyone knows what's my mission. So our mission, the through line in all of that, is to help American businesses be more competitive. Sometimes that means leveling the playing field by protecting our technology. Sometimes that means investing in businesses. A lot of times that means helping US businesses to export. I spend a ton of time helping, especially small and medium-sized businesses, export to other countries so they can grow and become more profitable, create jobs. So that's where I'm focused. I want American companies to be able to outcompete the world. No one is better than American entrepreneurs, American business owners, American small businesses. And if we have a level playing field, we will outcompete every time. So it's true. And so my job is to do everything we can across that vast, from the bowels to the top, to help American businesses compete.
So prior to being the U.S. Secretary of Commerce, you were the governor of Rhode Island.
I was.
And prior to that, you were the treasurer of the state. But interestingly enough, you founded a venture capital firm, Rhode Island's first venture capital firm. So taking your experience in business and forward to government, how do you make sure that government works for businesses and that you can really break through with businesses?
Yeah, I would love to hear from you about, I wish I could turn the microphone around on this one. because, I used to run a business. For 11 years, I ran a business. And it's frustrating sometimes, right? It's frustrating. How do I have a question. Where do I go in the government? It's massive. And it's a hard thing. So what I try to do, I spend a lot of time getting out of the office. Actually, it's why I'm here. I'm here because the governor asked me, but also because, today, in just a day, I'll talk to maybe, 20 or 30 small businesses, medium-sized businesses, big businesses in the state of Michigan. Like, tell me, what's going on? What are you really struggling with? What are your real challenges? How are whatever, job training, interest rates, whatever, what's going on? So I think it's never you can't overestimate the value of getting out and talking to people. So I try to do a huge amount of that, and I encourage my team to do that and listen and then adjust where we can. I think our job in the government is to just try to create the conditions for businesses to be successful. So what are some examples of that? One example. Under President Biden's leadership, we passed the infrastructure law, biggest piece of infrastructure investment ever in the country's history. That's what government ought to do, invest in roads and bridges, puts people to work and creates opportunities for your businesses to be successful. One piece of that law is to provide broadband internet to every American. Commerce Department is implementing that. I have $50 billion to invest to make sure every American has high-speed, high-quality, affordable internet. State of Michigan is receiving $1.5 billion to do just that. And we're working very closely with the governor and her team to make sure at the end of this, every Michigander, and I mean everyone, every small business, every school child, every family has access to the internet. And we will do that at a price they can afford. $100 a month is not a price they can afford. President Biden is serious about that. Got to be affordable. So why is that? That's my job. You cannot outcompete if you don't have the internet. If you're running a farm and you can't get online and order what you need to order or predict the weather, or if you're a school child, if it's a kid in school trying to do your studies, or you're trying to get a degree online at night, you can't do all that if you don't have the internet. And right now, almost 1 million Michiganders either don't have access because it doesn't exist or it's too expensive. So that's like one example to try to make investments to create the conditions for businesses to thrive. And that's how I think government and business work best. The truth of the matter is this, and I've been in business, I've been in state government, and I'm now in federal government. If you're trying to do big things and create massive change, no one of us can do it alone. We can't. Great things happen when the government, businesses, universities come together and each play our role. And that's why I like to try to have that spirit of partnership with the private sector and the work that we do.
So speaking of that partnership, businesses are choosing Michigan for its a diverse and abundant workforce, the business-friendly environment, the low cost of living. With so many place-based investment programs under your purview, can you explain how Michigan and the federal government can incentivize business investment in the state?
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, place-based investment. Biden administration, we have a core belief that you shouldn't have to leave where you're from to get a job, right? You want to live in Michigan? You want to live in Detroit, Lansing, wherever? My husband's from Mount Pleasant. I spent a lot of time in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. You from Mount Pleasant, Michigan? You ought to be able to work and live in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. And so what does that mean? You shouldn't have to go to New York City or San Francisco to get a decent job, or your kids. So that means we are doing place-based investments, exactly like you just said. About a year ago, I was so proud to stand with the governor and Mayor Duggan. My department made a $60 million investment in and around Detroit to help stimulate the autonomous vehicle and electric vehicle industry. The Department of Energy is making huge loans and grants to companies in Michigan in the battery industry. Whole new industry, right? Could create new batteries. Where better than Michigan to do that, building on your historic record in car manufacturing. But it's a brand new industry, so you need a hand. So we're making big investments in and with companies in Michigan to develop the battery space, the solar space, and the EV space. By the way, it's not just investments in place, it's also leveling the playing field. A couple of weeks ago, the president said we're going to put a tariff on Chinese EVs at 100%. I want to go back to my statement. America will outcompete and out-innovate even China if everyone plays by the same rules. We cannot win if certain countries overly subsidize and dump into our market. So it's a combination of place-based investments, but also making sure everybody plays by the same rules so that we have a level playing field. But I think that when I think about places in America that are worthy of investment, Michigan's at the top of the list. The history of manufacturing, the fact that we are moving as a nation towards what you are good at, manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, EVs, AVs, the fact that you have great leadership at the state level and the municipal level, the fact that you are fixing the damn roads, I heard. You have great educational institutions. That's huge. You know, this is where businesses want to be, and that's why we're making these big investments in your state.
You mentioned an economic competitor in China. You mentioned Michigan's long history of manufacturing, but you have some personal history with both, in that your father worked at a watch factory in Rhode Island, and they ended up going overseas, and he lost his job at 56 years old.
Yep.
What from your father's experience did you learn, and how can that help us learn more about the future of American manufacturing?
Yeah, you know, I appreciate you asking that. I didn't know you were going to ask about my family, but I appreciate the question. When President Biden called me to ask me if I would do this job, I was in the middle of my second term as governor. I had 2 teenagers, and I was a little reluctant, truthfully. I didn't want to leave my state. I didn't want to uproot the family. We were talking about the job, and then he said to me, Gov, I want you to come be my partner to rebuild American manufacturing. And he had me. I called my brother, and I said, hey, Tom, what do you think? And my brother said, Gina, Dad would be so proud. You got to do it. And the reason, I come from a state, Rhode Island. If you haven't been, you have to visit. Which was, when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, it seemed to me like, you know, everyone had a job in a jewelry manufacturing facility. You guys make cars, we made jewelry. Bulova Watch, Speidel, Coro. It's where there was a job for everyone. It wasn't just making, but it was all the supply chain. The electroplating companies, the machinists, the tool and die companies, right? So it was a whole ecosystem. My dad worked at Bulova Watch. He worked there for 28 years until one day he and all of his friends found that they were going to be out of a job because the jobs were going overseas. And as a kid, I remember so vividly, my mom would give him his lunch bag, he'd get in the car with the carpool, and it felt secure to me, it felt good. There was a place in that factory for everyone. His best friend was a security guard, somebody was a manager, somebody was an HR clerk. And so he taught us like, he would constantly, every night at dinner, you can't be a great country unless you make things. There's something special about making a living making things. It's true. You can't be a great country unless you make things. And our experience in Rhode Island, when I became governor in 2014, my state had the highest unemployment rate in the country. You never want to be there. Why? Because we just watched all the manufacturing jobs go away and the whole ecosystem around it. When I took office, the unemployment rate in the building trades in Rhode Island was 25%. That's tough stuff. When I left, it was 1%. After 6 years, I said, we will make things again in Rhode Island. We will get you back to work, Rhode Island. And we did. And I believe in manufacturing. And I bet the story I told, a lot of you could relate to. You know, for us, it was jewelry. For you, it was auto and other advanced manufacturing and the whole ecosystem and supply chain around it. Well, you know what? Let's get back into the business of making things. Since the president's been in office, this country's created almost 1 million new manufacturing jobs. We believe in manufacturing. Who says we can't manufacture in America? No one. If we have a level playing field, we can do it. So I have a lot of passion for this. I lived it. I am a product of a guy who went from being an immigrant and raised by, meat cutters to having a middle-class job, sending 3 kids to college, and one of them as governor. And my sister and brother very successful too, all because of that manufacturing job. Don't require a college degree necessarily, high paying, and a lot of pride. And so that's what we're doing. And I believe in it, and we can do it.
That's great. That's great. And unsolicited, I'll put in a little plug for Rhode Island. You said that most people in the room probably haven't been there. I've spent some weeks every summer in Newport, Rhode Island, and it is beautiful.
Nice.
It's not Mackinac Island.
I know. I know.
I have
You
to say that to
sound
make
like
sure I
my
can get
husband.
I have to say that to make sure we can get out of the room. It's not
I know.
Mackinac Island.
I know.
But it's beautiful in its own right. You mentioned the president. You mentioned innovation, which I know will be a topic of a very special keynote this afternoon. In October 2023, the president issued an executive order on the safe and secure and trustworthy development and use of AI. And different businesses use AIs in a variety of ways, but people are scared. You mentioned losing jobs. The future can be scary. What is the department doing to ensure that AI is being used in a net benefit to society rather than a detriment?
Yeah. Good, really good question, and something we have to figure out together. You read a lot about entrepreneurs saying they worry about AI leading to, human extinction. You read these stories, and I'm like, why would we let that happen? We should control it. Like, technology is to serve humanity, not the other way around. So it's exciting to think about AI. Like, AI is applied to curing cancer. AI is applied to discovering drugs more quickly. Frankly, AI can help the US be more competitive at manufacturing. And I think so we have to lean into what's exciting. But on the flip side, we have to make certain that the way AI is developed is safe, is secure, because if it's safe, then people will trust it, and then they'll adopt it and use it. And if it isn't, then bad things will happen, but also, as you say, fear will develop. So we've created at the Commerce Department the AI Safety Institute. We're bringing together some of the leaders, leading researchers, leading companies, leading entrepreneurs, to try to set forth what are the standards for safe AI development. So I'll give you an example. we want to make sure that every big AI model is tested by us before it goes public. Because sometimes these models, they do things that the inventors didn't even predict. They quite literally have a mind of their own. So when they're let out into the world, they may have unintended consequences. So at the Commerce Department, we're developing a test bed so the models come to us first and we can test them before they're let out, the really sophisticated, big frontier models. That's one example of what we're doing. We're also developing standards for what is adequate watermarking. You want to know when you see content, is that the real person or is that AI generated? So we're going to put a watermark on everything. But what's adequate watermarking? So you can really trust, is it real or is it fake? I think we're in like the second inning of AI. It's like early in it. And so it's a balance, right? I think it's a balance. We want to innovate, continue to innovate, move forward, but go enough at a pace and have guardrails so that things don't get out of control. I will also say, I know there's energy companies here and power companies here. AI runs on two things: semiconductor chips, which we can talk about, but energy, power, electricity. It's unbelievable how much power AI will consume. So states that have not just good education, good skills, good roads and bridges and such, but also affordable, clean energy, those states will be the winners in AI because AI is just a huge power consumer.
You mentioned chips and semiconductors, and Michigan certainly felt the impact of disruption to the semiconductor supply chain during COVID and the pandemic. How is Commerce implementing the CHIPS Act to secure the supply chain of semiconductors?
This is probably the most exciting thing I get to do. So under the president's leadership, Congress passed the CHIPS and Science Act. By the way, I noticed that Senator Stabenow and Congresswoman Dingell are here, both of whom voted for the CHIPS Act and were huge advocates, so thank you guys. I think they're here. So this is a $52 billion investment to stimulate domestic production of semiconductors. And this is huge. This is like, the space race. This will be known as one of America's greatest investments in industry. Let me just say this. Right now, the United States invented the semiconductor industry. Silicon Valley is called Silicon Valley because of the chips. Chips are made on silicon. We used to make 40% of all the semiconductors in the world in the United States of America 30 years ago. Today we make 10%. Right? Before we were talking about that decline of manufacturing. We invented chips. We made 40%, now we make 10%. We used to make 20% of the world's leading edge chips, the super sophisticated chips that AI is run on, that are in electric vehicles. Today, America makes none, zero. Think about that. We buy 93% from Taiwan. 93% of the semiconductor chips that go in our cars, our air and defense systems and missile systems, all of AI, we buy from one company in one country, Taiwan. You think that's safe? I don't think that's safe. So what we are doing is we are investing with the private sector. For every dollar of government money, we're trying to bring forward $10 of private capital to bring back American semiconductor manufacturing. And that means in the Midwest, and that means in Michigan. You have some phenomenal companies. At the end of doing all this work, we're going to go from 0% of leading edge chips in the United States to 20% by 2030. It's going to happen. And we're going to just increase. And the best thing about this is the whole supply chain comes back, right? Just like we were saying. If you have one huge semiconductor facility, I was just at one out in Arizona. One facility is the size of 11 football fields. For every manufacturing company, you have chemical suppliers, material suppliers, tool and die, circuit, the whole, think of all those jobs. This will easily create over 1 million jobs in the United States of America, many in the Midwest, many in Michigan. And on top of that, next time, God forbid, we have a supply chain disruption like COVID, you're not going to see 10,000 workers in Kalamazoo put on a furlough because they couldn't get the chips needed to put the car together. That's what happened. 10,000 workers were put out of work on a furlough for want of a single chip that went to windshield wipers. Couldn't get the chip, couldn't put the windshield wipers together, couldn't put the cars together, people were put out of work. That's not safe, that's not secure, and we can do better. So we're going to create these manufacturing jobs, but also make sure that all the rest of manufacturing has a more resilient supply chain. And I think, I guess we're out of time to end, like that is a great way for government and business to work together. Our investments will enable you to do your job in a more resilient, effective, competitive way. And that's everybody wins when we do that.
So, Secretary Raimondo, on behalf of Governor Whitmer and Sandy Brua in the Detroit Regional Chamber, Suzanne Shank in the Mackinac Policy Conference, and everyone in this room, we bestow upon you the honor of Michigander by marriage. So you're one of us now, and we hope to see you back in Mackinac soon.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me.